Hi everyone. Today's episode, I'm going to talk about, do you really need to know everything about your story before you start writing? Now, this is an attempt for me to bust the myth that sometimes when I'm about to write, I'm like, okay, but I don't really know where the story is going to end. I don't even know if the story is going to amount to anything. And I'm going to look at both sides of the coin and allow you to decide. But usually, I don't really think that this is an excuse enough. But I can't make such statements until I have given the facts and stated the facts and then say, okay, this is the conclusion that I'm making. Of course, you tend to make your own conclusion yet, but let's see. Now, by the end of this episode, you understand the balance between planning and discovering the writing process. Now, first of all, let me share two stories with you. We have J.K. Rowling, the writer of Harry Potter series, and then we have Stephen King. Now, J.K. Rowling, while she was writing the Harry Potter series, had everything planned out, like everything. All the stories, how they connected, the plot twist, what happened, what went wrong, why this thing linked to this stuff, and everything was really, really detailed. And while Stephen King, when asked about how he usually approaches writing, what he said was he usually starts with a situation. So he has probably a boy walking in the woods with probably a dog or something or a cat, and then stuff could happen, and he just allows things to happen, allows things to go wrong, and usually that's how it starts from. Now, these in when we look at these stories I just gave, what we realize is there are two major approaches to writing. There is the planning, and then there is the discovery. Now, of course, it doesn't mean there is the planning, there's discovery, and there are people who have different shades of it. So there are those who discover and then plan. So those who have kind of like have a rough, they want to, for, okay, how do I explain this now? There are people who they want to have a rough idea of what the whole story would look like, a rough outline, not a detailed sketch of what's happening, what color some person is wearing, what they said, and everything. Just a rough sketch. Okay, this is where the story would end and stuff like that. And they write. And then there are others who they don't necessarily know the whole story, but what they just want to know is what will be the end of the story, like the end. And from that end, they write backwards. So they write a story to meet that end. Those are one kind of writers. And then there are others who they don't necessarily know what's going to happen next, but they want to know the next, like this chapter, how they want to have this chapter planned that. And then when they finish planning this chapter, they write the story and then they plan the next chapter. Rather than others who are like, I need to like plan everything about the story before I can even actually start writing. Okay. Yeah. So the thing is, as Dr. Rose said, writing is like driving in the night, in the fog. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. Now, there are writers who they write without even knowing what the next sentence is going to be, without even knowing what the next scene is going to be, without even knowing what the next chapter is going to be, without even knowing if it's a character is going to die. And then the character dies, you're like, I'm pretty much surprised, like you are. And you're like, no, you're the one who killed that character. I'm like, dude, I had no idea. Like, it just happened. The story, it wasn't even me. Like, the story just went its own way, and I was just there to write it. They don't really know what the next thing is going to happen until it happens. And the writers like that, yeah. And for them itself, the whole idea of finding out the story is a thrill in itself. It's an enjoyable process itself. While the others, they would like to know the story, and then they can fit in a lot of things. They can work and rework things out as much. But the whole idea is this: oftentimes, we do not know what we are. We do not know what we like. We do not know what is preferable to us. We do not know the method of writing we should approach writing our story with. If we need to know everything, but we can just start writing. We don't know. We've never probably attempted that before. We've never really written a story before. So we sit down and we say, I think I need to know the whole story before I actually start writing. I think I really need to know everything about the story before I can actually start doing anything. I think I could probably discover. The thing is this: you have never attempted any of it before. So you don't know what works for you. The only way to know what works for you is to try it, is to do it. And I'm not just saying you try it. It's like try and put all attempts to follow through. And in doing that, you realize that, okay, this is what works for me. Now, I'll give an example. It's more like someone asks you, do you take they make a mention of one recipe or something like that, one food recipe. You're like, no, I don't like it. Like, wow, have you eaten it before? No, I've never tasted it. I've never eaten it. So is it like you don't like any of the ingredients they use for the food? Or you forbid any of the ingredients, or you're allergic to any of the ingredients? No, 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 I'm not allergic to the ingredients. I don't forbid any of the ingredients for religion or anything. And it's not like the food is going to make me fat or I'm trying to abstain from it or any of those stuff. It's a pretty much healthy food, like based on the fact of how much I know about the ingredients and everything, but I just don't like it. Okay, why don't you like it? Have you tasted it before? No, I've never tasted it before in my life. So how can you confidently say that you don't like something if you've never tasted it before? Like, I don't know. You just get to know. Like, it's a feeling there. You just know when you know. Dude, seriously. Like, how do you really know that you don't like something if you've never tried it before? So it's when you like test it, you're like, oh, dude, wow, this is absolute crap. Wow, I've been missing out a lot. This is my new favorite food. So in terms of writing itself, the approach, planning or discovery, or in between planning and discovery along the way. The question is, how do you know which works for you? It is to attempt them. It's to try and plan the work. It's to try to discover the story itself, whichever way, and see which one works for you, which one allows you to shine creatively. But then we are not going to sit and where we are and say, well, I don't really know if I should know everything about the story, if I should before I start, or I don't really know where the story is heading. Like, you have to pick one, just pick any one and find out. Like, if you try discovery writing and you're like, oh, the story is not really going well. No, I don't like this feeling of not knowing what comes next. Okay, let's plan out the story. You plan it out and you try using that approach. You write the story. You're like, oh, I like to have my stories planned out, and I find that it really works for me. And now I can focus on the words, on creatively telling the story and everything, rather than thinking of what comes next and all that. Yeah, but you have to attempt a method. You have to attempt a style before you can figure out what works for you. Until then, you're not going to sit down and say, I don't know. You're not going to sit indecisive. You have to actively take a step towards deciding something to find out. If let's say for example you try planning and you are a discovery writer, and what's going to happen? The worst thing is going to happen is you're going to learn that, oh, planning is not really my thing. I think discovery is my thing, and that lesson you've learned would help your future writing projects, and then you work faster, work better, because you wouldn't have to spend a lot of time thinking of what approach you need to use to write, what approach you need to use to tell that story. You already know, so you just go and you write. Yet. So basically, the writers who know the end of the story, the writers who plan the whole story, the writers who know the next sentence, the next scene of the story. Yeah, those who just figure it out and they move on. They just discover it. And there are those who pretty much have the whole story figured out in their head. And so when they sit down to write, you're just writing the story. It's more like you're typing out something, like you're copying out a passage. It's there already. It's made up already. So you don't like spend so much time. Why the others who every step of the way, it's a process of figuring it out. Every step of the way is a process of finding out where the story would lead to. Okay, now one of the things I would say is that many authors have discover crucial elements of their story during the writing process. You have to be in the process. A lot of things you see that plan itself won't reveal to you. Even if you have to plan all the story like detail, a lot of things will be bound to change. But just that some people cannot really work without a plan. But the plan is more like a fallback to. It doesn't mean that things can't change. Things can always change. Overplanning can also stifle your creativity and spontaneity, which in a way, but you won't really know what works for you except you attempt and except you try, except you experiment with it to write stories. Then you figure out what is and what is not for you. That's the thing. So different writers have different ways and different levels of pre-planning. There are those who do detail, there are those who do some little planning, and then there are those who go nothing. They're like, I just want to write this sentence, and then the next sentence, and then the next sentence, and then boom, my book is done. And the sweet thing about writing is that everybody has their own approach to it, to writing. So there is no like, oh, this is how you have to do it. No, try it out. Like, in the first place, the things we are trying, they're not as much as we would think they are. It's not like we're trying 1,000 different ways to approach our work. It's usually like 5 or 10 like different ways we could approach our planning of our work and see what works and what doesn't work. You get, so it's things that we can really try and move forward with, and then realize that, okay, this is what works for me, and then use that lesson to work on other projects and work faster on other projects, rather than spending the time thinking that, oh, I don't really know if I should plan my story. I don't really know if my story, I should know everything about my story before I can write my story. No, dude, like seriously, just start writing the story. Then you figure out what is and what is not for you. And yeah, so now we've moved on to the practical advice section of the podcast. So the question is, how can you find the right balance between planning and discovery for your writing? So the question is, just start with a basic outline, okay? At least to give you a rough sketch, a rough safety to say, okay, this is what you fall on. So you're not like being fear of, oh, I don't know what's going to come next. But for others, that's the thrill itself of writing. And or most other person, the writing itself is the thrill of writing, not figuring out the next thing. You have to find out what works for you. So you want to try both heavily plotted stories and both spontaneous stories. Try everything and see what works for you. Just try it. You're not going to start making conclusions until you've tried or interacted with something. So if you get stuck while planning, start writing and see where it takes you. If you get stuck while you just write to discover, try planning and then see what works for you. Remember, you can always revise, restructure your drafts. Now, let's move on to the listener challenge for this episode. So the listener challenge for this episode is, I want you to take a story idea and write two versions of it. Write two versions of the first page, okay? The first page is one carefully planned, detailed outline, everything. The other one is one completely spontaneous. I mean, like spontaneous in every word of it. Like you don't know the next word that is going to come up. And you just write and see which one you loved working on and which one seems to be the best for you. And I'd love to know. Let me know in the comment section. Yeah. So far we've looked at the main takeaways. We've looked at one of the things is that you can either be a planning writer or a discovery writer, but the main thing is that you can't figure out what you are until you attempt doing it. It's in trying that we realize what is and what is not for us. Okay, and then there is no one size fits all. There is no like this is the approach, this is the golden rule. If you're not doing it this way, you're wasting your time. You're making a huge mistake that is going to work for you. No, like they're different parts, and sometimes your projects you do detailed plan, the other projects you just spontaneous writing, and it goes somewhere. So the question is, don't let one method being not being okay. Don't allow not being sure of what method to use stop you from doing the work itself. Like literally, they're just like two methods or so. So it's not like you have to choose between 100, 1,000. If the first one doesn't work, you try the second one. If the second one doesn't work, you try the first one or different versions of the first one, and definitely something's going to work along the way. But don't allow that itself be the reason why we do not start writing in itself. Okay. The key is to find a method that helps you and keeps you writing and brings your story to life. That's the whole essence of this thing. Okay. Now, if the episode has helped you so far to rethink your writing process, please leave us a review. It helps other writers find our podcast. And yeah, join us tomorrow for the next episode. And I've been your host, Uyemichi Nwakona. You've been listening to the Build Writing Podcast. See you in the next episode. Until next time, keep writing.